You know, when I first started at that little marketing firm, I was excited. Really excited. It wasn't some flashy agency in a glass tower downtown. No catered lunches or rooftop meetings. But it was something real. A team of about 15 people, half of them younger creatives like me, all crammed into this open-plan office that always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and dry erase markers. I was a graphic designer, fresh out of school, still carrying around that spark, that belief that if you worked hard, your talent would speak for itself. And to be honest, I loved the work. There's something deeply satisfying about taking a blank screen and turning it into a visual campaign that makes people feel something. I poured myself into those projects. Late nights, missed weekends. I'd lose track of time just tweaking colors and layouts until they felt just right. The firm itself had some decent clients. Local businesses, mostly. A few regional chains. Nothing too fancy, but enough to keep us busy. The kind of work that builds your portfolio and teaches you how to meet tight deadlines with a smile. Now, my boss, let's just call him Rick. He was slick. Always dressed a little too well for someone not doing much. He had that easy way of talking that made clients trust him right off the bat. Smooth, charming. Could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. To the outside world, Rick was the face of the company. Inside though? Inside, he barely lifted a finger. You see, Rick had this routine. Delegate everything, show up for the meetings, then soak up the praise. He wasn't mean exactly. He didn't yell or throw tantrums. No, Rick was worse. He was the kind of guy who smiled at you while slowly pulling the rug out from under your feet. He'd pop over to your desk, ask how things were going, maybe drop a vague idea, make it pop more, or can we get some synergy in there? Then disappear for hours. And when the project was done, when you finally nailed the vision, Rick would swoop in just in time to present it to the client like it was his masterpiece. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. I mean, it was my first real job. I didn't want to be that person. I figured, he's the boss. Maybe that's just how it goes. But it didn't stop. Campaign after campaign, my designs, my concepts, my late-night breakthroughs, all delivered under Rick's name. No mention of the designer behind it. At first, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. What mattered was the work itself, right? I was building my experience, learning the ropes. But deep down, it started to gnaw at me. That kind of thing eats at your pride little by little, you know? Especially when you care. Especially when you're trying. Still, I kept showing up. Kept giving my best. I told myself, be patient. They'll see your value eventually. Good work speaks for itself. I really believe that. But as you'll see, sometimes it takes more than good work to be seen. Especially when someone else keeps turning off the spotlight. There was one campaign. The campaign that changed everything. It was for a regional client, a mid-sized home goods brand, looking to reinvent their image. They wanted something fresh, bold, something that would make people stop scrolling and actually look. The brief was vague, like most are. Modern, but classic. Clean, but colorful. Something that pops. You know, the usual marketing contradictions. But I saw the potential. I went all in. I spent nights sketching, mocking up color palettes, trying out different typography styles, until it clicked. It finally came together in this campaign that blended minimal design with vibrant, emotional storytelling. It had this warm, human tone to it. Real families, real moments. Nothing fake or overly polished. It real. And it worked. We sent it off to the client, and their reaction was immediate. They loved it. So much so that they submitted it to a regional marketing awards board without even telling us. A few weeks later, we got word that the campaign had won. Not just nominated, won. Now, you'd think that would be a big moment for me. And for a brief second, I thought it would be. I imagined them calling me into the office, patting me on the back, maybe even announcing a promotion. I'd been there nearly 2 years by that point. I wasn't expecting a parade, but I thought, finally, maybe now they'd recognize who was actually doing the heavy lifting. Instead, Rick called a team meeting. He stood there in the center of the room, holding the award plaque like it was a damn Olympic medal, beaming like a proud father. And then, without missing a beat, He launched into a speech, talked about the vision for the campaign, his leadership in shaping it, how he guided the team creatively. And all the while, I sat there in the back, feeling my stomach twist tighter with every word. He never said my name. Not once. I wasn't even asked to join the client dinner that night. I just went home, sat on my couch, didn't even turn on the TV, just stared at the wall, and tried to figure out what the hell had just happened. The next week, I asked to talk to Rick privately. I told him calmly that I'd put in months of work, that I felt I'd really grown and contributed something meaningful. I mentioned the campaign. I asked, not even demanding, just asking, was there a chance to move up? Maybe a lead designer position? Something. And he just smiled. That same smooth, dismissive smile. Said something like, "You're doing great where you are. Let's not rush things." Then he added, "Besides, it's all about teamwork here. We're not really into spotlight chasing." Spotlight chasing. I walked out of that room feeling like someone had just turned my heart inside out. It wasn't even just about the promotion. It was that he knew what he'd done. And worse, he thought I'd just swallow it. Again, that was the moment. The line got drawn right then and there in my gut. I wasn't going to let this man keep standing on top of my work, like a king on a mountain he didn't build. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I wasn't going to let it slide. After that meeting with Rick, something shifted in me. You ever have a moment where the illusion just breaks? Like you've been squinting through fog, trying to convince yourself it's just morning mist. Then suddenly, the sun cuts through and you see everything for what it is. That was me, walking back to my desk, still hearing that word in my head. Spotlight chasing. It hit me. This wasn't about one campaign. This was a pattern. Rick didn't just forget to give credit. He made a habit out of it. So I started paying closer attention. Quietly. I didn't tell anyone. I just watched. I began asking around, not suspiciously, just casually bringing up old projects with coworkers. "Hey, who worked on that winter promo last year? Or weren't you part of that tech client rebrand?" And that's when I started hearing the same story over and over. "Oh yeah, I worked on the concept, but Rick presented it as his. I actually designed the original layout, but Rick told the client he came up with the framework. Yeah, he said it wasn't worth arguing about credit. And each time, people would sort of shrug, like it was just something they'd learned to live with. Some had already left the company, and when I reached out to a few of them on LinkedIn, their replies came back fast and honest, almost like they'd just been waiting for someone else to say it out loud. One woman told me she'd worked at the firm for 3 years, ran 3 full campaigns from start to finish. Not once. She said she left because it felt like she was ghostwriting someone else's success story. I pieced it together bit by bit, and what I saw was a trail of stolen credit that stretched back years. Rick had been building his entire reputation off the backs of young, eager designers. He cherry-picked the best parts of their work, polished it just enough to present with flair, then stood in front of the clients and took a bow. What made it worse? He was good at it. He knew exactly how to frame things, how to look just involved enough to seem important, without ever getting his hands dirty. And because turnover in our field was high, nobody stuck around long enough to call him out. They just burned out and moved on. I sat with that for a few days, and let me tell you, it burned. Not just because he'd done it to me, but because he'd done it to all of us, over and over, and no one had ever held him accountable. It wasn't just unfair, it was wrong. And the more I thought about it, the more a plan started to form. Not out of anger exactly. Not at first. It was more like a cold, clear resolve. Rick had made a career out of standing on other people's shoulders. Maybe it was time someone kicked the ladder out from under him. Once I saw the pattern, how Rick had been leeching off everyone's work like it was just part of the job, I knew I couldn't let it keep happening. But I also knew better than to confront him head-on. Rick was the kind of guy who'd smile through your accusations, twist your words, and somehow make it all sound like you're misunderstanding. He was a smooth operator. Fighting him out in the open, that'd get me nowhere. No, if I was going to stop him, I had to be smarter, quieter, let his ego do the damage for me. Around that time, we landed a big pitch with a potential client, a national chain, looking to completely rebrand. This was the kind of account that could change everything for a small firm like ours. Rick, of course, was giddy. He called an all-hands meeting, threw around buzzwords like game changer and industry footprint, and said we needed to bring our A game, which really meant I needed to bring my A game. He handed the project to me without even blinking. "You've got the eye," he said, patting my shoulder like we were old friends. "Just make it magic. I'll handle the client." That's when I knew I had my moment. I got to work right away, but this time I wasn't just designing a brand package. I was laying a trap. The pitch involved a full suite of visual assets, logos, digital ads, mock-ups for packaging and store signage, even a short animated teaser. I poured everything I had into it, made it sleek, fresh, and unmistakably mine. And then, I buried my signature. Not a literal signature, of course. That would have been too easy to erase. I used a digital watermark, subtle and clever. I built it right into the design elements in a way that was invisible at first glance. A tiny layering technique that spelled out my initials in the negative space when the images were scaled up on a projector. Nothing you'd see on a printout or a laptop screen, but on a big presentation slide, crystal clear. I even tested it on the office projector after hours just to be sure. And there it was, my mark. Quiet, invisible, but undeniable. Like leaving a fingerprint on every frame. I made sure everything was neat and polished before handing it off. "Ready to go," I told Rick, like I always did. He barely looked up. "Perfect," he said. "I'll walk them through it." And that was that. The night before the pitch, I didn't sleep, not because I was nervous. At least not exactly. It was more like I was on the edge of something I couldn't take back. I kept asking myself, what if this backfires? What if they blame me instead? What if it doesn't even work? But then I thought about all those people before me, the quiet frustration in their voices when they told me their stories, the way Rick just kept walking away clean every time. And I thought, no, this needs to happen. Because some people only learn when they're caught red-handed. The day of the pitch, the office felt different. You could feel the tension in the air, the good kind at first. That nervous energy when something big's about to happen. Everyone was dressed a little nicer, speaking a little softer. Rick had even traded his usual flashy tie for a more corporate look. You could tell he wanted to come off serious, trustworthy. The client arrived right on time. A handful of well-dressed execs from the home office, all with perfectly practiced smiles and firm handshakes. Rick greeted them like their old college buddies. "Let's change the game," he said, leading them into the presentation room. I followed in quietly and sat near the back, pretending to be support staff. That's what Rick liked him at the front. Everyone else out of the spotlight. He launched into the pitch with his usual charm. "We wanted to create a bold new identity for your brand, something that captures your roots, but looks toward the future," he said. "We," but he meant. Then he pulled up the first slide, and there it was, my design, my work, blown up on the projector in full color, clean and bold, exactly as I'd planned. And there, just faintly at first, my initials, tucked into the background of the hero image, shaped into the negative space of the product shot. Elegant, hidden, but suddenly, undeniably there when displayed at scale. The room shifted. One of the client execs leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Then another. "What's that?" someone asked, pointing toward the corner of the image. Rick looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Is that text? There's something behind the product image." Rick's smile faltered. One of the tech guys dimmed the lights and zoomed in. And that's when it happened. Clear as day, my initials, small but unmistakable, appeared in the center of the background pattern. Not flashy, not disruptive, but present, enough to prove authorship. The room went silent. Rick stammered. "Oh, that must be a design glitch. Maybe one of the junior designers left a placeholder in there by accident. I'll check on it." He turned and looked straight at me, panic flashing behind his eyes, and I just looked back. Calm, not smug, not gloating, just done pretending. The client's head of marketing asked, "Who actually designed this?" Rick hesitated, then started talking in circles. "Well, the whole team contributed, but by then, it was too late." The client exec turned toward me and asked directly, "Did you create this?" I nodded. "Yes, I did." More silence. Then one of them said, "It's brilliant. We love it." But we do need to know who we're actually working with, moving forward. Rick tried to recover. He even laughed nervously, saying something about how creative teams are fluid and collaborative. But they weren't buying it. Not anymore. The questions kept coming. They wanted to know who developed the concept, who did the animation, who built the branding elements. And every time Rick fumbled for an answer, I just sat there, letting the truth speak for itself. He'd walked into that room thinking he'd steal the show like always. But for once, the spotlight had a lock on it, and it wasn't his name inside. After the meeting ended, the energy in the office changed, and it wasn't subtle. Rick didn't say a word to me, didn't even make eye contact. He just kind of hovered around the conference room, shaking hands with the client team, trying to act like everything was fine. The clients thanked us again, but this time, they shook my hand, looked me in the eye, told me how impressed they were, and that they'd be in touch. A few hours later, HR called me in, not for a warning, for a private conversation. Apparently, the clients had already reached out. They were confused. Why hadn't I been introduced as the lead? Why was the guy who couldn't answer basic design questions the one running the presentation? It wasn't just awkward. It raised serious red flags. HR had no choice but to start asking questions. And the more they dug, the more they found. Emails, files, time-stamped edits, Slack messages, all proving that Rick hadn't just overlooked giving credit. He'd been systematically taking other people's work and presenting it as his own, for years. Within a week, Rick was gone. Not a polite resignation, not a quiet transfer. Fired, and not just fired, blacklisted. Word got around fast in our industry, and let me tell you, nothing kills a career in creative work faster than being caught stealing from your own team. As for me, well, things changed. At first, I was honestly just relieved. I didn't even care about recognition anymore. I was just glad to finally be seen, to have the truth out there. But then the client reached out directly. They wanted to offer me a position, not just a freelance role, a lead designer role. Better pay, better team, better environment, real growth. They said they valued integrity and creativity, and they wanted someone who could bring both. I accepted, and let me tell you, walking into that new office, being introduced as the designer behind the campaign, finally standing in front of a room where I didn't have to hide in the background, that felt better than any revenge. Looking back, I don't regret anything. Not the long nights, not even the betrayal, because all of it taught me something I needed to learn. Sometimes, the system won't protect you. Sometimes, you have to protect yourself. But if you stay sharp, stay patient, and trust your own worth, eventually, the truth has a way of lighting up the whole room.